What if I told you that everything you have been searching for has been waiting not in the next achievement, the next conversation, the next destination, but in the space between your thoughts, in the stillness you have been avoiding your entire life? What if the noise you surround yourself with, the endless scrolling, the constant planning, the need to fill every moment with something, anything, is not a sign of being alive, but a way of running from the only place where life actually happens? Sit with that for a moment. Not to judge it, not to fix it, just to notice it. Because most people spend their entire lives pointed outward, scanning the horizon for meaning, for validation, for proof that they matter, while the entire time, something quiet and patient has been waiting inside them, like a door that was never locked, only forgotten. You have felt this before, even if you cannot name it. There are moments, brief and often dismissed, when the world falls away and you find yourself simply present. Maybe it was early in the morning before anyone else woke, when the house was still and the light came through the window in a particular way. Maybe it was after a long conversation ended and you sat alone, not thinking, just breathing. Maybe it was in the middle of a walk when suddenly the thoughts stopped and you noticed the sound of your own footsteps, the texture of the air, the way your body moved without effort. These moments are not accidents. They are not distractions from the real work of living. They are the real work. They are the moments when the noise falls away and something truer, something older, something that has always been you, rises to the surface. Carl Jung spent his life listening to this quiet voice, not as a mystic, but as a scientist of the soul. He understood that the unconscious is not a dark basement filled with things we are afraid of, though it contains those too. It is also the place where symbols emerge, where dreams speak in a language older than words, where patterns repeat themselves not to punish us, but to teach us. Jung called this synchronicity, the meaningful alignment of inner and outer events. And he knew that when you begin to quiet the noise inside, the world outside begins to reflect something back to you. Not because the world has changed, but because you are finally able to see what was always there. He spoke of the persona, the mask we wear to move through the world, and the self, the deeper center that exists beneath all the roles we play. And he knew that most people live their entire lives in a mask, never realizing that it is not who they are, only what they have learned to show. In this video, I will share with you several signs, not as a checklist, but as a map of an inner territory you may already be entering without knowing it. These are not things you do. They are things that happen to you when you stop resisting the quiet. They are shifts in perception, changes in what you notice and what you care about, and how you respond to the world. And if you have been feeling lost, if you have been questioning everything, if the things that used to matter no longer hold the same weight, I want you to consider that this is not a crisis. It is not a failure. It is not evidence that you are falling behind. It may be the first sign that something inside you is waking up. Stay with me until the end, not because I will give you answers, but because together we will sit with the questions in a way that allows them to unfold. You may find that experiences you dismissed, moments you thought were meaningless, were actually the beginning of something you have been preparing for your entire life. The first sign is this. You begin to notice that the conversations you used to enjoy now feel hollow. Not because the people have changed, though sometimes they have, but because something in you has shifted. You sit across from someone you have known for years, someone you care about, and they're talking about the same things they always talk about. The complaints, the gossip, the surface-level analysis of events that do not matter. And you find yourself nodding, smiling, participating in the rhythm of the exchange, but inside, there's a distance, a quiet awareness that this is not nourishing you. It is not that you judge them. It is not that you think you are better. It is simply that your attention has turned inward, and the noise of the outer world no longer captures you the way it once did. This can be disorienting. You may wonder if something is wrong with you. You may feel guilty for not being as engaged, for not laughing at the jokes, for not sharing in the outrage or the excitement. You may try to force yourself back into the old patterns, to care about the things you used to care about, but it feels like wearing clothes that no longer fit. And here is what most people do not understand. This is not a loss. This is not you becoming cold or disconnected. This is you beginning to hear a quieter frequency, one that has always been there but was drowned out by everything else. When you become quieter inside, the noise outside becomes unbearable, not because it is louder, but because you're no longer numb to it. Jung would say that you are beginning to differentiate. You are beginning to separate what is truly yours from what you have absorbed from the collective, from your family, from the culture. The persona, the social mask, begins to feel tight because the self underneath is growing. And this growth is not comfortable. It is not celebrated. Most people will not understand it. They will sense your withdrawal and interpret it as rejection. They will ask if you are okay, and you will not know how to explain that you are more okay than you have ever been, even though everything feels uncertain. You are not leaving them. You are arriving at yourself. But that arrival requires a kind of solitude that our world does not honor. So you sit in those conversations, and you feel the gap widening. And instead of filling it with more words, more effort, more performance, you let it be. You let the silence sit between you and them. You let yourself feel the discomfort without rushing to fix it. And slowly, over time, you begin to notice who leans into that silence with curiosity and who pulls away from it with fear. This is not a test. This is simply information. The people who can sit with you in the quiet are the ones who are also listening inward. The ones who need the noise are still running, and that is okay. You were running too, not long ago, but now you are standing still, and the world looks different from here. You begin to notice your body in ways you never did before. This is the second sign. You have lived in your body your entire life, but for most of that time, it was just a vehicle, a thing that carried your head from place to place. You fed it when it was hungry, or you ignored it when you were busy. You pushed it when you needed to perform, and you collapsed into it when you were exhausted. But now, something has changed. You are aware of tension in your shoulders that has been there for years. You notice the way your breath becomes shallow when you are anxious, the way your stomach tightens when you are around certain people, the way your chest opens when you are alone in nature. Your body is speaking to you, and for the first time, you're listening. This is not about fitness or health in the conventional sense, though those may follow. This is about presence. This is about realizing that your body holds memory, holds emotion, holds truth that your mind has learned to ignore. Jung spoke of the shadow, the parts of ourselves we have disowned, and much of the shadow lives in the body. The anger you were taught not to feel, the desire you were taught to suppress, the grief you were told to move past. All of it is stored somewhere in your muscles, your fascia, your nervous system. And when you become quiet enough, when you stop filling every moment with distraction, the body begins to release what it has been holding. You may find yourself crying for no reason. You may feel waves of emotion that do not seem connected to anything happening in your present life. You may have dreams that are vivid and strange, full of symbols you do not understand, but that feel important. This is not a breakdown. This is an unburdening. This is the body finally feeling safe enough to let go. And the only way to support this process is to stop controlling it, to stop analyzing it, to stop trying to make it mean something or fit into a narrative. You simply allow it. You sit with the sensation. You breathe into the tightness. You let the tears fall without needing to know why. Most people are terrified of this. They reach for a drink, a screen, a person, anything to numb the intensity. And there is no judgment in that. Numbing is a survival strategy, and it works until it doesn't. But if you are here, if you're still reading, it is because some part of you knows that numbing is no longer an option. You have tried it. You have spent years, maybe decades, keeping the volume turned down. And now the body is asking, quietly but insistently, to be felt, to be heard, to be honored as the wise animal it has always been. So you start to move differently. Maybe you take long walks with no destination. Maybe you stretch in the morning, not as exercise, but as a conversation with your own muscles. Maybe you place your hand on your chest when you feel anxious, a small gesture of reassurance, of presence. And slowly, the body begins to trust you again. It begins to soften. And as it softens, so does your mind, because they were never separate. The tension in your jaw is the same as the worry in your thoughts. The tightness in your hips is the same as the fear you carry about the future. When you release one, you release the other. This is not metaphor. This is physiology. This is the lived truth of being human. The third sign is that you lose interest in convincing anyone of anything. This is subtle but profound. You used to care deeply about being right. You would argue your point, defend your perspective, need others to see what you saw. Not because you were arrogant, but because you believed that if you could just explain it clearly enough, they would understand. And understanding, you thought, would bring connection. But now, something has shifted. You state your truth when it feels right, and then you let it go. You do not chase it. You do not need to prove it. You do not need anyone to validate it. It simply is, and that is enough. This does not mean you have stopped caring. It means you have stopped confusing agreement with connection. You have realized that people will see what they are ready to see, and no amount of explaining will accelerate that process. Jung spoke of individuation, the lifelong journey of becoming who you truly are, and he knew that this journey is solitary. Not lonely, but solitary. You cannot do it for anyone else. You cannot drag them along. You can only walk your own path and trust that those who are meant to walk alongside you will recognize the terrain. So you stop trying to wake people up. You stop sending articles, sharing insights, hoping they will have the same realization you had. You stop feeling frustrated when they do not change, when they repeat the same patterns, when they choose the comfort of the familiar over the risk of the unknown. You see them with compassion because you remember being where they are. You remember the safety of not questioning, the relief of blaming others, the temporary comfort of distraction. And you do not judge them for staying there, because you know that leaving requires a kind of courage that cannot be taught, only discovered. This shift changes everything. Your relationships become simpler. You stop performing. You stop managing other people's perceptions of you. You stop trying to be understood by people who are not listening. And in that space, something new emerges. The people who are also on this path, the ones who are also becoming quieter inside, they find you, not through effort, but through resonance. You recognize each other not by what you say, but by the quality of presence you bring. The conversations are different. There is less talking and more listening. There is less advice and more witnessing. There is less need to fill the silence, because the silence itself is nourishing. And you begin to trust this. You begin to trust that you do not need to force connection, that you do not need to convince anyone of your worth, that you do not need to defend your choices. You simply live them. And the people who are meant to see you will see you. The people who are meant to stay will stay. And the people who leave were never yours to hold. This is not cold. This is not detachment. This is the deepest form of respect for yourself and for them. It is the recognition that everyone is on their own journey, and your job is not to guide them, but to walk your own path with as much presence and integrity as you can. The fourth sign is that you begin to crave simplicity, not as an aesthetic, not as a trend, but as a deep, almost physical need. You look around your home and see too much, too many objects, too many choices, too many things that require your attention, your energy, your care. You start to let go, not in a dramatic purge, but slowly, thoughtfully. You donate the clothes you have not worn in years. You throw away the papers you have been saving for no reason. You clear surfaces, create space, allow emptiness to exist without rushing to fill it. And as the outer environment becomes simpler, the inner environment follows. This is not about minimalism as a lifestyle brand. This is about recognizing that every object you own, every commitment you make, every relationship you maintain requires a piece of your attention. And attention is not infinite. It is the most precious resource you have. When you become quieter inside, you begin to feel the weight of all the things you've been carrying. Not just physical things, but mental and emotional ones too. The grudges, the obligations, the identities you have outgrown but still cling to because letting go feels like losing yourself. And you realize that you have been living in a state of constant overwhelm, not because life is inherently overwhelming, but because you have said yes to too many things that were not truly yours. So you start to say no, not with anger or resentment, but with clarity. You decline invitations that do not resonate. You step back from projects that drain you. You stop checking your phone every 5 minutes. Stop consuming content that leaves you feeling empty. Stop engaging in conversations that go nowhere. And at first, this feels uncomfortable. There is guilt. There is fear that you're missing out, that you are becoming boring, that you're letting people down. But you sit with that discomfort, and you do not let it pull you back into the old patterns. Because underneath the guilt is something else, a quiet relief, a sense of spaciousness, a feeling that you are finally breathing fully for the first time in years. Jung understood that the psyche needs space to unfold. He spoke of active imagination, the practice of sitting with images and symbols that arise from the unconscious, and he knew that this required silence, stillness, a lack of external input. When your life is cluttered, when every moment is scheduled, when you're always consuming, always producing, always performing, there is no room for the unconscious to speak. The dreams stop coming, the insights stop arriving, the creativity dries up. Not because you have lost it, but because there is no space for it to emerge. And so you create that space. You protect it fiercely. You treat it as sacred because it is. And as you do this, something unexpected happens. You do not feel deprived. You feel rich. You do not feel lonely. You feel connected to something deeper. You do not feel bored. You feel alive in a way that has nothing to do with excitement or stimulation, and everything to do with presence. You sit with your morning coffee and actually taste it. You walk outside and notice the way the light falls through the leaves. You have a conversation with someone and you're fully there, not planning your response, not checking the time, just listening. And these small, simple moments become the most meaningful ones. Not because anything special is happening, but because you are finally awake to the beauty that has always been here. The fifth sign is that you stop seeking closure. This is a difficult one because we have been taught that every story needs an ending, every conflict needs resolution, every question needs an answer. But life does not work that way. People leave without explaining why. Situations end ambiguously. Questions remain unanswered. And for most of your life, you have tried to force closure where none exists. You have replayed conversations in your mind, imagining what you should have said. You have reached out to people who hurt you, hoping for an apology that never comes. You have analyzed and reanalyzed events, trying to make sense of them, trying to find the lesson, trying to turn pain into something productive. But now, you are beginning to let things be unfinished. You are beginning to accept that some people will never understand you, some relationships will never be repaired, some wounds will never be explained. And instead of seeing this as a failure, you see it as the truth. Not everything ties up neatly. Not everything means something. Sometimes things just are, and your job is not to make sense of them, but to carry them with grace. Jung spoke of holding the tension of opposites, the ability to sit with paradox, with ambiguity, with not knowing. This is the mark of psychological maturity. This is what it means to grow up emotionally. You think about the people who are no longer in your life, the friendships that faded, the relationships that ended, the family members you no longer speak to. And instead of feeling bitter or confused, You feel a quiet acceptance. You do not need to demonize them to move on. You do not need to make them wrong to make yourself right. You can hold the complexity. You can acknowledge that they were important to you, that they taught you something, that they were part of your story, and also that it is okay that they are no longer here. Not every connection is meant to last forever. Some people are chapters, not the whole book, and that does not diminish their value. It simply acknowledges the truth of impermanence. This acceptance extends to yourself as well. You stop needing to have it all figured out. You stop waiting for the moment when you will finally feel complete, when all your flaws will be resolved, when you will become the person you think you are supposed to be. You realize that you are always in process, always becoming, always unfolding. There is no final destination. There is no moment when you arrive and get to rest. The work of being human is ongoing, and that is not a burden. That is the beauty. You are not broken. You are not behind. You are exactly where you need to be, even when it feels like you're lost. And so you stop chasing closure. You stop needing every ending to feel satisfying. You let the questions hang in the air. You let the mysteries remain mysterious. You trust that understanding will come when it is meant to. And if it does not, that is okay too. This is not resignation. This is not giving up. This is a deep trust in the process of life. A recognition that you do not need to control everything, that you do not need to know everything, that you can live with uncertainty and still feel grounded. Because the ground is not out there in the answers. The ground is in here, in the quiet center that remains steady even when everything else is shifting. The sixth sign is that you become more sensitive, not less. This surprises people. They assume that becoming quieter inside means becoming harder, more detached, less affected by the world. But the opposite is true. When you stop numbing yourself, when you stop using noise and distraction to avoid feeling, you become exquisitely sensitive. You feel everything more deeply, the beauty and the pain, the joy and the sorrow, the connection and the loneliness. And this sensitivity is not a weakness. It is a strength. It is the sign that you're finally alive, finally present, finally willing to be touched by life instead of armoring yourself against it. You notice this in small ways. A piece of music moves you to tears. A conversation with a stranger stays with you for days. You see someone struggling and you feel their pain in your own body. You watch the news and you cannot disconnect from the suffering. You feel the weight of the world in a way that is almost unbearable, and yet you do not turn away. You do not harden. You do not build walls. You stay open, even when it hurts, because you know that closing yourself off is a kind of death. It is safer, yes, but it is not living. Jung spoke of the wounded healer, the idea that those who have suffered deeply are often the ones most capable of helping others. Not because they have all the answers, but because they have been to the depths and returned. They know that pain is not something to be fixed or avoided, but something to be felt, to be honored, to be integrated. And this sensitivity, this openness to feeling, is what allows that integration to happen. You do not bypass your emotions. You do not spiritualize your pain away. You do not pretend that everything is fine when it is not. You feel it. You let it move through you. You let it change you. And this makes you different. People sense it, even if they cannot name it. They feel safer around you because you are not afraid of their pain. They feel seen by you because you're not trying to fix them or advise them or make them feel better. You are simply present. You are simply there, holding space, bearing witness, allowing them to be exactly as they are. And this is a rare gift. Most people are so uncomfortable with their own feelings that they cannot tolerate anyone else's. But you have done the work. You have sat with your own darkness. You have felt your own grief. And so you can sit with theirs without flinching. This sensitivity also means that you become more discerning about where you place your energy. You can feel when something is off. You can sense when someone is not being honest, when a situation is not aligned, when a choice is being made out of fear rather than truth. And you trust that feeling. You do not override it with logic. You do not talk yourself out of it. You honor it as information, as guidance, as the body's way of protecting you. And this discernment is not judgment. It is not about labeling things as good or bad. It is simply about recognizing what is true and what is not, what is nourishing and what is depleting, what is yours to carry and what is not. So you become quieter, yes, but you also become more attuned, more aware, more connected to the subtle currents that run beneath the surface of life. And this attunement is not something you can force or learn from a book. It is something that emerges naturally when you stop filling every moment with noise, when you stop running from yourself, when you finally allow the stillness to teach you what it has been trying to say all along. The seventh sign is that you begin to see patterns everywhere, not in a paranoid way, not in a way that makes you feel like you're losing your mind, but in a way that feels like waking up. You notice that the same themes keep appearing in your life, the same challenges, the same types of people, the same conflicts. And instead of feeling frustrated, instead of asking why this keeps happening to you, you begin to see it differently. You begin to see it as the unconscious trying to get your attention, trying to show you something you have not yet been willing to see. Jung called this synchronicity, and he believed that when inner and outer events align in meaningful ways, it is not coincidence. It is the psyche speaking. It is the self trying to guide you toward wholeness. You think of a friend you have not spoken to in years, and they call you that same day. You struggle with a question, and a book falls off the shelf with the answer. You dream of water, and the next day you find yourself crying, releasing grief you did not know you were holding. These are not random. These are breadcrumbs. These are invitations to pay attention, to go deeper, to trust that there's an intelligence at work that is larger than your conscious mind. And as you become quieter inside, these patterns become more obvious. You start to see how your current relationships mirror your relationship with your parents. You start to see how your fear of failure is really a fear of being seen. You start to see how your need to control is really a response to early chaos. And this seeing is not about blame. It is not about making yourself wrong or making anyone else wrong. It is simply about recognizing the patterns so that you can choose differently, so that you can stop repeating the same cycles, so that you can finally break free from the invisible scripts that have been running your life. This is the work of individuation. This is the process of becoming conscious, and it is not easy. It requires you to look at things you would rather ignore. It requires you to take responsibility for your part, even when it feels unfair. It requires you to give up the stories you have been telling yourself about who you are and why your life is the way it is. But on the other side of that discomfort is freedom. On the other side is the possibility of living from your true self rather than from the wounded child, the defensive adolescent, the performing adult. And that possibility is worth every moment of discomfort. So you start to track the patterns. You write them down. You notice when they appear. You ask yourself what they are trying to teach you. And you do this without judgment, without shame, without needing to fix anything immediately. You simply observe. You simply become curious. And in that curiosity, something shifts. The pattern loses its grip. The compulsion softens. The unconscious material begins to integrate, and you find yourself responding differently, choosing differently, being differently, not because you forced it, but because you finally saw it clearly. The eighth sign is that you stop waiting for permission. This is a quiet rebellion, but it is a rebellion nonetheless. You realize that you have spent most of your life waiting for someone to tell you that it is okay to want what you want, to feel what you feel, to be who you are. You have been waiting for your parents to approve, your partner to understand, your friends to validate, society to accept. And that waiting has kept you small. It has kept you safe, yes, but it has also kept you from living. Now, something has changed. You are beginning to give yourself permission. Permission to rest when you are tired, even if others think you are lazy. Permission to say no, even if it disappoints someone. Permission to pursue something that makes no logical sense, but feels deeply true. Permission to change your mind, to outgrow old dreams, to admit that what you thought you wanted is not what you want anymore. And this permission does not come from arrogance or defiance. It comes from a deep knowing that your life is yours and no one else can live it for you. This is terrifying at first, because when you stop waiting for permission, you also lose the comfort of having someone else to blame. If it does not work out, it is on you. If people do not understand, you have to be okay with that. If you fail, you cannot point to anyone else and say they held you back. You are fully responsible, and that responsibility is heavy, but it is also liberating, because for the first time, you are authoring your own life. You are making choices based on what feels true rather than what feels safe. And even when those choices lead to discomfort, to uncertainty, to loss, there's a rightness to them that you cannot deny. Jung spoke of the process of individuation as a movement toward the self, and the self does not care about social approval. The self does not care if your choices make sense to anyone else. The self only cares about truth, about alignment, about integrity. And when you begin to live from that place, when you begin to trust your own inner authority, everything changes. You stop performing. You stop pretending. You stop trying to be the person you think you should be, and you start being the person you actually are. And that person is often quieter, stranger, more complex, more contradictory than the persona you have been showing the world. But that person is real, and real is what you have been hungry for all along. So you take small steps. You make small choices that honor your truth. You speak up when you used to stay silent. You stay silent when you used to fill the space with words. You leave the party early because you need to be alone. You reach out to someone because you need connection. You stop explaining yourself, stop justifying, stop defending. You simply live, and you trust that the right people will understand and the wrong people will fall away. And slowly, over time, your life begins to reflect who you actually are rather than who you were taught to be. And that alignment, that coherence, is the most peaceful thing you have ever felt. The ninth sign is that you begin to value presence over productivity. This is radical in a culture that measures worth by output, by accomplishment, by how much you can do in a day. You have spent your life believing that your value is tied to what you produce, and so you have been in constant motion, always working, always improving, always trying to get ahead, to keep up, to prove that you are enough. But now, something is shifting. You are beginning to see that being busy is not the same as being alive. That doing more is not the same as living fully. That productivity is often just another form of avoidance, a way of not having to sit with yourself, a way of not having to feel. So you start to slow down, not because you are lazy, but because you are finally listening. You take a morning to do nothing. You sit with your coffee and stare out the window. You go for a walk without your phone. You let an entire afternoon pass without checking anything off your list. And at first, this feels wrong. It feels indulgent. It feels like you are wasting time. But you stay with it. You breathe through the discomfort. And slowly, you begin to notice something. You begin to notice that you are more creative when you are not forcing it. You begin to notice that solutions come when you stop trying to figure them out. You begin to notice that you feel more connected, more alive, more yourself when you are simply present rather than constantly doing. Jung understood this. He knew that the unconscious needs space to speak, and it cannot speak when you are always in motion. The insights come in the quiet. The dreams come in the stillness. The self emerges when the ego finally stops trying to control everything. And so you create that space. You protect it. You treat it as essential, not optional. You stop apologizing for needing rest. You stop feeling guilty for not being productive every moment. You recognize that presence is the work, that being fully here, fully alive, fully engaged with this moment is more valuable than anything you could accomplish. And this changes how you relate to time. You stop rushing. You stop feeling like you're always behind. You stop measuring your day by how much you got done, and you start measuring it by how present you were, how connected you felt, how much you allowed yourself to simply be. And this is not passive. This is not checking out. This is the most active, engaged, alive thing you can do. Because when you are present, you are available to life. You are available to the people around you. You are available to the insights, the beauty, the moments of grace that are always here, but that you miss when you're moving too fast. So you practice. You practice coming back to this moment. You practice noticing when your mind is in the future or the past, and you gently bring it back. You practice feeling your feet on the ground, your breath in your body, the sounds around you. And over time, this becomes your default. Not the thinking, not the planning, not the worrying, but the presence, the quiet awareness, the deep knowing that you are here, now, and that is enough. The 10th sign is that you begin to trust the process, even when you cannot see where it is leading. This is perhaps the most difficult and the most important shift. You have spent your life trying to control outcomes, trying to plan, trying to make sure that everything works out the way you think it should. But now, you're beginning to realize that life does not work that way. That you could do everything right and still not get what you want. That you can plan perfectly and still be surprised. That the path is not linear and the destination is not what you thought it would be. And instead of fighting this, instead of resisting it, you are beginning to surrender to it. This is not giving up. This is not passivity. This is a deep, active trust that there is a larger intelligence at work, that the universe or God or the self or whatever you want to call it is guiding you towards something you cannot yet see. Jung spoke of the transcendent function, the psyche's ability to bring together opposites and create something new, something that the conscious mind could never have imagined. And this process requires trust. It requires you to let go of the need to know, to let go of the need to control, to let go of the illusion that you are in charge. You think about the times in your life when things fell apart, the job you lost, the relationship that ended, the dream that did not come true. And at the time, it felt like a disaster. It felt like proof that you were not good enough, that life was unfair, that nothing would ever work out. But now, looking back, you can see that those moments were not endings. They were openings. They were the universe clearing space for something better, something truer, something more aligned. And you could not have seen it at the time. You could only see the loss. But now you can see the gift. And so you begin to trust that the same is true now. That whatever you're going through, whatever is falling apart, whatever is uncertain, is part of a larger unfolding. That you do not need to have it all figured out. That you do not need to force anything. That you can simply show up, do the next right thing, and trust that the path will reveal itself. And this trust is not blind. It is earned. It comes from lived experience, from seeing over and over again that life has a way of working out, not always in the way you expected, but in a way that is ultimately for your highest good. So you stop gripping so tightly. You stop trying to make things happen. You stop pushing and forcing and controlling. You let go. You breathe. You trust. And in that trust, there's a peace that you have never felt before. A peace that does not depend on circumstances, that does not depend on everything going right, that does not depend on having all the answers. A peace that comes from knowing that you are held, that you are guided, that you are exactly where you need to be, even when it does not feel like it. All of these signs, all of these shifts, they're not separate. They are all part of the same process. The process of becoming quieter inside. The process of turning your attention inward. The process of listening to the self rather than the noise of the world. And this process is not something you do once and then you're done. It is ongoing. It is lifelong. It is the work of being human. But as you continue, as you deepen, as you become more and more willing to sit with the quiet, something extraordinary happens. Life becomes clearer, not because you have all the answers, but because you're no longer looking for them in the wrong places. You are no longer seeking validation, approval, meaning, purpose out there. You are finding it in here, in the quiet center that has always been waiting for you to come home. And this homecoming is not dramatic. It is not a moment of enlightenment where everything suddenly makes sense. It is quiet. It is subtle. It is a gradual softening, a gradual opening, a gradual recognition that you are enough, that you have always been enough, that you do not need to prove anything or become anything other than what you already are. And in that recognition, there is a freedom that cannot be taken away, a peace that does not depend on circumstances, a clarity that comes not from having all the answers, but from being willing to sit with the questions. So if you're feeling lost right now, if you're feeling uncertain, if you're questioning everything, I want you to know that this is not a sign that something is wrong. This is a sign that something is waking up. This is a sign that you are becoming quieter inside. And that quiet is revealing what has always been true. You do not need to rush this process. You do not need to force it. You simply need to allow it. You simply need to create space for it. You simply need to trust that the quiet knows what it is doing, even when you do not. One simple practice you can begin with is this. Each morning, before you reach for your phone, before you start your day, sit for 5 minutes in silence. Not to meditate, not to achieve anything, just to be. Notice your breath. Notice your body. Notice the thoughts that arise and let them pass. Do not judge them. Do not engage with them. Just watch. And in that watching, you will begin to notice the space between the thoughts, the quiet that is always there underneath the noise. And that quiet is you. That quiet is the self. That quiet is the place where everything you have been searching for has been waiting all along. Another practice is to write, not to share, not to perform, but to simply let the words flow. Write about what you're feeling. Write about what you're noticing. Write about the patterns, the questions, the uncertainties. Do not edit. Do not make it make sense. Just let it come. And as you write, you will begin to see things you did not know you knew. You will begin to hear the voice of the self, the voice that has been trying to speak to you your entire life, but that you have been too busy to hear. And finally, spend time in nature. Walk without a destination. Sit by water. Stand under trees. Let the natural world remind you that you are part of something larger, something older, something that does not need to be understood to be trusted. The earth knows how to be still. The trees know how to grow without forcing. The water knows how to flow around obstacles. And you are made of the same intelligence. You do not need to figure it out. You simply need to remember. If this resonated with you, if you felt something shift inside as you listened, I invite you to like this video, to subscribe to the channel, to share it with someone who might need to hear it. And if you feel moved, leave a comment. Tell me which sign resonated most. Tell me what you're noticing in your own life. Because this work, this journey, it is not meant to be done alone. We are all walking each other home. And your voice, your experience, your truth, it matters. It adds to the collective unfolding. It reminds the rest of us that we are not alone, that we are not crazy, that this quiet path we are walking is real and it is worth it. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being willing to become quieter inside so that life can finally become clear.